Hello, everyone. I'm AJ, and I'm the founder and chemist of Sula Labs, which is a product development laboratory based in Los Angeles that develops products for Black owned brands and brands that are looking to develop and test products for darker skinned consumers. I'm really excited to be here today, and thank you so much, Jen, for inviting me to this e-summit, and I'm super excited to see the other presentations that take place today. But today, I will be offering you all a crash course on formulation. Some of it is equal parts business, equal parts science, and equal parts just making sure that you stay sane, because this is a crazy road. So without further ado, I introduce to you the development framework that we use at Sula Labs. And as you can see, there's a squiggly line that goes between all the steps in product development. Now, some people regard this as a linear process when it is in fact not a linear process, and you often actually find yourself bouncing back between certain stages of this development framework. So make sure, again, that you stay sane and buckle up, because it can often be a tumultuous ride, but it is often worth it. So the areas that we're going to cover today are market research, ingredient literature research, COG determination, formulation, stability and preservative testing, and I will leave the rest to my esteemed colleagues in the e-summit that will go over things such as claims, regulatory review, tech transfer, and manufacturing. Now, all of these really serve a certain question and answer them, right? So for example, market research. The question that's being answered by this is, where does my product fit in the skincare market? For ingredient and literature research, the question that's being answered here is, how will you create product efficacy? For COG determination, the answer here that is being observed from the question is, how much will your product cost and what will the margins be? AKA, can you afford it and make money off of it? For formulation, the big question is, how will you create your product? Which is the purpose of why I'm here today, so I will answer that later on in the presentation. And then lastly, stability and preservative testing. Is your product safe to use? And this is arguably one of the most important areas of this development framework. Now first, we're going to get all the businessy stuff out of the way. Market research. So oftentimes this really means, where does your product fit in the market? Product market fit is determining that the product that you're making has strong functionality, so a strong user experience that you can easily fit into a product's, use, right? Why are you even developing the product? If, for example, you're looking to slim down the amount of skincare routine steps and your product is a quote-unquote all-in-one. The other thing is a unique value proposition, so creating a unique and superior product. The next thing is making sure that your product fills a white space, which is, of course, really hard to do when the skincare product the skincare product market is super saturated. But you'd be surprised that there's still unmet desires of customers, which is still an opportunity for creating new products. And then lastly, speaking of customers, making sure that you have a target customer, which for many founders is often themselves. But product market fit is just one puzzle piece in the context of a larger framework, right? Where there's product channel fit, model channel fit, market model fit, and then of course, like we mentioned, product market fit. So what do all these things mean? Well, I'm going to go into them more in detail with an example that we've all known and loved, which is Glossier. So again, in calling out these sorts of vocabulary words, I just want to make sure that we have them all down. So a model every month, is it a gift with purchase product? It also answers the question, how do you acquire customers? Now, another vocabulary sort of area that I want to get out of the way is channel. So that means, where does your product live in terms of marketplace? Are you doing direct to consumer? Are you in retail only? Are you both? Or do you want to take the chance to build a brick and mortar and sell directly out of there, which is just a physical location for you to sell products? Now let's go back into this example for Glossier. So, I don't know if you guys remember, but I definitely remember when Glossier launched, and it was in the era when people were really beating their face, with dark, bold lip colors, really long lashes and eyeshadows and blush and contour. But Glossier really ushered in this really fresh sort of way to apply makeup. And also, if you were the person that was beating your face with, all this really beautiful, bold makeup, you could still use Glossier, and that was really groundbreaking at the time. So in developing these products, it's clear that they had strong functionality. So lightweight, easy to use makeup products that fit easily into a busy schedule or a busy routine, or a non-busy schedule. They had a unique value proposition, which was quite literally your skin, but better. They filled a white space. So again, makeup at the time was super high coverage, and there wasn't really a brand leading this your skin, but better area. And they had a target customer. Now, what I think was unique about Glossier, which I don't think you should put the pressure on yourself to have this element of uniqueness, is that their target customer spanned really widely, right? If you're someone like me, I don't necessarily like to put on a ton of makeup every day. I'm definitely the type of person that's gonna do a quick boy brow, I'm gonna do a quick lip gloss and a quick mascara. And that really worked for me. But even if you're not, you can still, fix up your brows with a Glossier boy brow, but still proceed to go with really bold lip color and so on and so forth. So it was really interesting and unique how Glossier did this. Now let's go to their fit model. Of course, their product was makeup and their channel was direct to consumer, and then they later on built a brick and mortar. Their model was direct to consumer and their channel was, of course, direct to consumer, so there was a lot of overlap there, as well as their brick and mortar. They were in the makeup market and extended to skincare through direct to consumer. And their product was really well positioned in their market, which was makeup in a makeup market. So make sure that when you're developing your product that you're able to check off a lot of these boxes. Now going into the next step, which is ingredient and literature research. So this answers the question, where do you go for efficacy inspiration? Meaning, how do you make sure your product is most effective as possible in solving the problem that you're presented? Now there are 4 ways that I like to tell folks to do this. The first being literature review. Now the pro for literature review is that you can find someone, if it's not you, anybody that is a scientist, that can go through clinical studies, ingredient properties, and review papers to make sure that the ingredients that you're targeting are as effective as they are marketed to be. However, there's a quick caveat here that I would like to mention. We all know Javon Ford, a wonderful cosmetic chemist and part of our community, and there's something that he said that really stuck with me in a Los Angeles podcast, which was, folks always tell you to do your own research, but sometimes that's actually not what you should be doing. You should find somebody who can, because there's often a lot of bias imparted in scientific research, and we want to make sure that we can see clearly through that haze. So the cons are that these studies may not be super rigorous and could be funded, by the agency that is wanting to push that product, which is totally okay, right? But ultimately, favorable results does not always mean reproducible in every context. The next area that you could look at is ingredient trend search. Our friends over at Spate do a really great job of this, but you could look at other channels such as Business of Fashion or Novi. And these tell you where the market has been. For example, snail mucin, if you look at Spate, you'll see high year-over-year growth in terms of Google searches. But the cons are that buzzy ingredients aren't always the most effective. Product testing is another way to go for efficacy inspiration. So for example, if you find products with an ingredient you love, you can look through the through line and say, okay, I think I like vitamin C. I'm going to test a bunch of products with vitamin C and see if they solve the problem that I'm looking for. But the cons are that it may not be reproducible for an entire market if it just works for you. So make sure you test wide and far. And then supplier data, which is one of my, it's an interesting one. The pros for this is that suppliers have often already tested ingredients of interest, but the con, I would say, is huge, and that suppliers don't always engage in rigorous and reproducible testing measures. So just because a supplier marketing brochure makes it look very beautiful, remember that, supplier marketing is also an industry itself, and that you should make sure that you test the product. My recommendation is that you use a combination of all 4 of these methods to go for efficacy inspiration. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty, which is formulation. One of the biggest questions that I hear is, where do I go to develop my products? And I feel you. This is hard. It's a really hard one. And it's not a one-size-fits-all. I would say go with the method that works for you and where you're at. One of the most popular ways to do this is by going straight to a manufacturer. They often charge you a development fee, and then they develop. Many manufacturers do this different, right? Where you get up to 3 free samples, and then, after the 3rd one, they charge you, or you get up to 5, and then if not, you pay the development fee again. There's several ways to do this. But the pros are that there are little to no hiccups in scale up and tech transfer because they're doing it right there with ingredients that are available readily to them. They may have connections with testing facilities if you want to do claims testing and you have access to their supply chain. However, the cons are that you don't always get formula ownership when working with a manufacturer unless, let's say, the terms are always different, but I've also seen like lab, and I've seen this actually hurt certain brand founders. And, manufacturers, they tend to be busy. So let's try to put less pressure on manufacturers. However, just know that there are certain pros and cons to evaluate with them. The second way is going to a product development lab or a formulation chemist that's freelance. Now, the pros are that you get a fully custom formulation in most cases. In most cases, you get your own formula ownership, and you get a lot of flexibility and creativity, which is highly favorable. But this may also take a little bit longer. It also might most likely be more costly than going to a manufacturer. And I've also seen more likely having hiccups in scale up. Now, this is not always the case, and I really want to make sure you all know that. But, of course, if you're going to a manufacturer with a formulation that they didn't make, it's going to take them, a little bit more understanding for them to know how they can scale it up. The last way to do this is by going private label. Now, the pros is that you have a quick go-to-market, and you usually have the products available for reorder. But the cons is that you likely won't get formula ownership unless you do, and it's not always differentiatable in market. You can always find a product that, or most of the time find a product that has a very similar ingredients list. Now, let's go into determining your cost of goods. Now, again, we have someone from a manufacturer speaking today, and I'm really excited to see her presentation. So definitely, tune into hers because that's going to probably go more in depth on determining your unit cost and cost of goods, because this tends to be a point of contention in formulation. There's often a fight between product quality and product cost. So how do you land on the best happy medium? Well, a higher ingredient percentage does not often mean better ingredient efficacy, and I cannot stress this enough. I can't tell you how many times we've developed products at Sula Labs when folks want to go really high on an active ingredient, but all this is really doing is either destabilizing their product, which we'll talk about later, and making their unit cost skyrocket. But that's not always really necessary, right? Your dose determines the poison, and if you want, in this case, good poison, you got to make sure that you have a really informed dose. And many times, higher ingredient percentage does not mean higher efficacy. I also want to make sure that we don't, demonize private label customization. This is actually a really great way to go to market quicker. And of course, it also allows you to really nail down your unit costs a lot tighter. But overall, I would encourage you to be realistic about package sizing and packaging type, your amount of active ingredients, and your MOQs. I have this pyramid here that we've designed called the cost of making skincare, which I also have a QR code for you to, swipe and take a look at for a Sula Labs report article that we've written really in depth about how to really tweak these areas of the pyramid. But today, of course, we just talked about the goop. But there are other things to consider, which we're not going to cover today, which are primary and secondary packaging costs, MOQs, distribution channels, and then, of course, we go to what the customer sees, which is your selling price. Now, let's get into stability and preservative testing. This is inarguably one of the most important things when it comes to formulation. There are stability must-haves, and I know this is going to come up again and again in this e-summit today because regulations really touch every area of the value chain when it comes to product development. It touches formulation, it touches manufacturing, and then of course it touches regulatory. So let's go really deep into this. I think when it comes to quote-unquote DIY development, where many people get it wrong is that, there's nothing necessarily wrong with making something at home or in your kitchen or in-house. However, the biggest sort of point of contention that comes with this is not following the correct regulations. So let's talk about some stability and regulation testing must-haves. First of all, preservative testing. This is something that brands think they can skip over. From indie brands to larger brands, you should not be skipping over this. I'm going to give you a cheat sheet for all the things that you will need in order to make sure that your product is safe to use. For preservative testing, if your product is anhydrous, meaning there are no, waters in or anything that is aqueous in your product, and if it's completely oil-based, completely butter or wax-based, you should engage in water activity testing. This testing determines if water will grow with microbes when in contact with your product. For example, if you have a body oil cleanser for the shower, people are often scooping into a jar, right? You got to be smart about what kind of packaging that you're using because this will inform how well your water activity testing might do, or the likelihood for people to grow microbes in your product. If there is water, you can go into preservative efficacy testing, which is probably the most common way to do this, and it determines whether yeast or mold will grow in your products. I highly encourage that you invest in these two types of testing no matter where you are in your journey. They're not super costly either. Preservative testing and water activity testing tend to take about 4 to 6 weeks, and it will definitely save you in the long run. Then we have formal stability testing. This is a 12-week test, usually at 40 degrees Celsius for shelf life claims. So this is actually interesting because it's mostly standard to do this, but not every manufacturer does this. So make sure that if you go to a manufacturer that they're doing formal stability testing over long term. This is helpful for shelf life claims, but it's also helpful for making sure that your product doesn't change in odor, color, pH, viscosity, or any other textural features over time. One of the biggest mistakes that I see from folks is coming to us and asking for SPF development, thinking that it's a walk in the park, but not knowing that it's actually a really, really long journey. You have to do all of the above testing, and you have to do SPF testing, which is a clinical test, which I am not sure if this will be gone over today, but when it comes to SPF formulation, you're formulating UV filters into a product that really have to stay intact so that you can keep the same SPF value over time. We've all seen studies where the SPF value has been tested and they're not the exact same SPF value on the bottle. So this is actually something I highly encourage you to not DIY at home and really, really make sure you work with a chemist or manufacturer to develop. There are also different registrations that you have to do in order to be MOCRA compliant. So please, please, please make sure that if you're developing an SPF, that you do so with a professional and engage in all of these testings. So where can you access stability testing? Formulation laboratories such as Sula Labs, we offer this as a service. Manufacturers also do this in-house or outsource, usually for PET testing. And testing facilities, which I know sounds very vague, but I know Craig Weiss will be on here today, and CPT testing is actually a place where, they offer all these different types of testing. So make sure you invest in it. Again, some of the biggest mistakes we've observed here at Sula Labs. Using food-grade materials. If you want to fail preservative efficacy testing, this is an easy way to do so. Using powders and such that are often used in the food industry because they often, help grow yeast and mold. Using clear packaging with vitamin C. I've seen that fail stability testing. So if you have light-sensitive or heat-sensitive active ingredients, you really want to make sure that they are stable over time and that your packaging is complementary with your formulation. This isn't up here, but I also remember having a project where they had some food grade powders in bamboo lid packaging with no liner on the lid. And they were asking why is it always growing yeast and mold? And I remember being bamboo is a great food source for bacteria, right? That's an easy way to grow yeast and mold. So there's a synergy between your packaging type and the stability of your product. One thing that I also don't have up here, which is kind of it's optional, but I would still say to try and do it, is package compatibility testing, which is a special type of stability testing that makes sure that your packaging is compatible with the formula inside. So for example, that if you're developing a retinol, that you have a stable retinol over 6 months because you're using airless packaging. So now that we've gone over everything, I just want to, lastly tell you a little bit more about Sula Labs since my background is in clinical research and formulation. This is a company that I started over 2 years ago, where we really see ourselves as a better way for beauty brands to build and research Black beauty products of the future. So if there's anything that I said in today's presentation that may be of interest to you, we do product formulation, claim substantiation, and custom ingredient development because we are a team of nerds. And also important to know about this is that we also do SPF testing, moisturization testing, hydration testing, and any other claims testing that you might need. But overall, thank you so much for coming to this presentation, and I'm super excited to see the other ones, and I will take questions.